What comes to mind when you hear about Vietnam? Beautiful beaches, delicious food, or glittering skyscrapers? Today, I'm going to show you a completely different perspective. Right in the heart of the busiest city where I live, there's a decaying oasis, where low-income people have clung for over half a century in conditions you can hardly imagine. I was even nearly arrested by the police, just for trying to bring these real-life facts to light. Two worlds, two starkly contrasting social classes living in the same city. This is episode 2, and it will completely change the way you perceive real life in my country. Hello everyone, I'm Hao, 29 years old, living in Vietnam. The streets where I live are always full of energy, car horns, and a bustling pace of life. Today I start my day at a newly built 5-year-old luxury apartment complex, a symbol of the city I live in, clean, tidy, and modern. But inflation and the economic recession following the COVID-19 pandemic spare no one. Prime business locations here are still closed due to a lack of customers. Fortunately, a few cafes have survived, providing people with a place to sit and chat. The area here is very livable, with plenty of amenities nearby such as security, cleaning services, and a park for children to play in. This is the dream of many young families with decent incomes in Vietnam. I walked up to the parking garage, a large, modern space filled with cars, giving one a sense of security about a well-planned lifestyle. I started walking up and around the parking garage. The parking lot here is very spacious. Vietnamese people often use motorbikes for convenience, although they may also own cars, so you'll see a lot of motorbikes parked here. I wanted to go higher to explore, but security here is extremely strict, and the smart elevator system requires a resident card to access it. I had to ask a resident to swipe their card for me so I could go up to the 17th floor with them. The apartment hallways are very beautiful and quiet, but there's an interesting detail. Even living in a high-end place, the spontaneous business habits of Vietnamese people still appear. Some residents still display 2 0-liter water bottles in the hallway to sell for extra income. Convenience and adaptability are always instinctive traits of the residents. And then, the incident happened. The extensive security camera system detected a stranger carrying a camera. That was me. Security guards immediately arrived and asked me to go to the management office for questioning. Even the local police were there to verify my identity. To be honest, I was quite nervous. But because I cooperated well, and my only purpose was to make a lifestyle vlog, everything was resolved smoothly. This strictness demonstrates the safety of wealthy neighborhoods, but it also prepares you for a completely free and harsh experience elsewhere. Escaping the onslaught of cameras and modern conventions, I wondered, how are those who can't afford million-dollar apartments here living? I sped to another intersection, where time had stopped 50 years ago. Look, right at this prime intersection stands a dilapidated, severely run-down apartment building. Below, expensive cars stream by, but looking up, you see the cracked, crumbling walls of a structure over half a century old. This place is about to be demolished, but if you look closely at those balconies, you can still see elderly figures sitting there silently. What are they looking at? The expensive cars below, or their own lives? Getting inside wasn't easy because I looked around and didn't know which way to go. I had to stop on the sidewalk and ask an elderly woman nearby for directions. You see, even in harsh times, the warmth and hospitality of the Vietnamese people remained constant. This woman, nearly 70 years old, was very friendly and enthusiastically led a stranger like me to the apartment building's entrance. Stepping through the gate, I was truly shocked. A world completely opposite to the bustling, chaotic scene outside. Old furniture, piles of garbage, and motorbikes and bicycles parked haphazardly along the staircase. You might think it's incredibly messy, even dilapidated. But for the low-income residents here, they have no choice. Every square meter of hallway is valuable, and they utilize every available space to survive. The higher we climbed, the gloomier the atmosphere became. Before me was a pitch-black corridor. The space was dark and somewhat frightening, devoid of any natural light, and the residents had to turn on extra lights for illumination. To be honest, I was terrified and didn't dare step into that dark corridor because of the chilling feeling that enveloped me. But look, those old slippers are still left outside the door. In this darkness, the lives of flesh and blood people continue every day. I needed to move out onto the balcony to get some fresh air, only to find a pile of old abandoned belongings. I didn't know who owned them, why they were there, or when they were left there. All I knew was that they were old, very old, and seemed unwanted. Below was the bustling modern world, while where I stood was poverty and dilapidation. The gap between rich and poor was just a perspective away. And here's a specialty of Vietnam, the tangled network of electrical wires, like a spider web. Foreign tourists often find it interesting, taking photos as a cultural feature. But to me, it's a symbol of the burdensome, patchwork state of a bygone era that the city is struggling to change every day. As I ventured deeper into the corridor, my anxiety lingered because it was dark and deserted. In my 29 years of life, this was the first time I had witnessed such a scene. The cramped, dilapidated apartments, barely a dozen square meters in size, were crammed together. Every activity, washing clothes, cooking, washing dishes, spilled out into the shared passageway. Here, the concept of privacy was a luxury. People were forced to share living space to the maximum extent. My hesitation completely vanished when I caught a few curious glances directed at the camera. There was no avoidance or concealment, only a calm acceptance. In that moment, I understood that I wasn't here to pity or judge, but to empathize. My instincts told me to linger, to seek a nod, a smile, to listen to the stories of those whose lives had become intertwined with this place. The harsh realities of life become even clearer as you walk down this hallway and see lots of clothes, dishes, and even underwear hanging out right by the entrance. Don't be quick to judge them as uncivilized or messy. When you're poor and your house is too small, aesthetic standards become meaningless. They're just trying to live in the most authentic way possible. As I walked, my pace slowed automatically. The initial hesitation or feeling of suffocation vanished, giving way to a profound silence. I realized that things I had taken for granted, or the pressures of everyday life, suddenly seemed insignificant. Standing at this boundary, my chest tightened, not out of pity, but out of awe, at an enduring resilience far beyond my own imagination. There are even some bird cages here. The locals keep birds as pets. How crazy. I turned onto a different path, and the atmosphere here was somewhat different. The peeling, faded walls seemed to tell the story of decades gone by. However, that feeling of desolation was quickly broken when I began to notice signs of life. A hacking cough from the room at the far end, the faint, pungent smell of cooking oil wafting through the air, or a warm, golden light emanating from a slightly ajar door. These simple things suddenly made this dark space feel strangely familiar and warm. I was fortunate to meet an elderly mother and daughter who have lived here for over 50 years. This area is about to be demolished, and they will receive compensation. But why do they still cling to this dilapidated place? Because they are old, lack the financial means, and don't have the money to buy new housing. While waiting for new government policies, they are forced to stay here. They are waiting for a change, even though they are filled with anxiety about finding a new home.
Ở đây con thấy nó lâu rồi và không biết là bao lâu rồi á. 7-80 năm rồi.
Nếu mà trước nữa xếp 70 năm rồi.
Dạ dạ. Để bà ở đây lâu chưa?
Bà ở năm Tỵ Xéo này.
Dạ. Dạ. Dạ dạ dạ, để con chạy lên đó. Yeah. Rồi giờ con chưa vô trong này.
I continued moving to explore the top floor, which had been abandoned for a very long time. Not a soul was in sight. The path leading up was truly horrifying, piled high with trash, incredibly dusty, and foul-smelling. I had to hurry past it because I was about to collapse. The rooms were empty. The corridors were bare and full of garbage, and there was some spoiled food that the locals, perhaps out of love for the abandoned wild animals, had left there. The locks were rusty and unopened, and garbage was everywhere. It was terrifying. No one would think that right in the center of a modern, developed city, there could be such a desolate and abandoned space. The old pathways and peeling walls I had just passed no longer seemed frightening or cold to me. My steps were more leisurely, as if I were trying to imprint every sound and every simple warmth of this place into my mind. It turns out that when we open our hearts to empathy, even the darkest corners can become strangely familiar. Amidst that seemingly endless silence, I suddenly realized I was wrong. This place was not decaying. Life was still flowing silently, simple and enduring. A ray of late afternoon sunlight shone through a gap. The scene was raw and beautiful, forcing me to look back at myself and understand that the value of a home sometimes lies not in its luxury, but in the connection between people who share the same heartbeat. While the brand new, modern buildings outside offer privacy and international standard luxury, these old corridors retain a distinctly Vietnamese specialty: the spirit of community and the sharing of living space to the fullest extent. Foreigners may see the lack of material possessions, but they will certainly sense the richness of human connection. Life for low-income earners may be difficult, but the warmth of human connection is never left behind. I stepped out of the shadows of the old apartment building, back into the sunshine and the bustling sounds of car horns. In just one day, I felt like I had traveled through 2 centuries. The strict security of the modern apartment complex shows us the future of Vietnam, but the cramped, dilapidated state of this building is a witness to a historical period burdened by generations past. Vietnam is developing at a breakneck pace, but that journey still includes the slow steps of the poor and lonely elderly left behind. They don't surrender to fate, they adapt, they share minimal living space, and they patiently wait for a better tomorrow. At 29, this trip taught me to appreciate what I have and to look at life with more empathy. If you were a foreigner, what would you think of these 2 contrasting sides of Vietnam? Please leave your comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel to continue following me in my next real-life vlogs. Thank you, and see you soon.